If you're a business owner, there's going to come a point where you need a stronger tech stack to have a clear picture of everything all in one place. From startup to enterprise, NetSuite is your one-stop solution. Visit netsuite.com/SPI to download their KPI checklist for free and support this podcast too. If you do find yourself buried in manual work or struggling to have a clear picture of your business, you should know 3 numbers: 37,000, 25, and 1. 37,000, that's the number of businesses which have been upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. 25, NetSuite turns 25 years old this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. And the number 1, because your business is one of a kind. So you can get a customized solution for all of your KPIs and one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need to grow, all in one place. Right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/SPI. That's netsuite.com/SPI to get your own KPI checklist. netsuite.com/SPI. There's a better way to create a website, a professional, crisp website you'll be proud to publish, and it just takes seconds. This is all thanks to Hostinger's AI website generator. I recently took this for a test drive, even shared this on my YouTube channel. It was mind-blowing. Not just how quick you can build a website, but with the AI, how great it actually can write copy for you. You can use the AI logo maker. Plus, it got it up in no time, and it looks good. Absolutely mind-blowing. So if you want to build a website, go to Hostinger, because they're a top, highly rated global web hosting platform. And all you have to do to build a website is just answer 3 questions and let the AI do all the work for you. You can build as many web pages as you need without knowing how to code a single line of anything. They have great support, too. That was one thing that I had a problem with another host back in the day. Hostinger has 24/7 support and a library of video guides. And here's the thing. You can do this for less than $3 a month, including a free domain name. That is crazy. So create a live website now at hostinger.com/SPI. And listeners of this podcast, you can enter SPI for 10% off your order and a free domain name. hostinger.com/SPI and use the code SPI for 10% off and a free domain name. Give it a spin.
This is a Smart Passive Income Podcast with Pat Flynn, session number 70.
We're up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to get lucky. Podcast.
Welcome to the Smart Passive Income Podcast, where it's all about working hard now so you can sit back and reap the benefits later. And now your host, who got a Sega Saturn instead of a PlayStation for Christmas, Pat Flynn.
Job searches can feel like they're taking forever, a real slog. So stop searching and just match with Indeed. So ditch the busy work, use Indeed for scheduling, screening, messaging, so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. If you want to hire fast, you need to go where the talent is. You can get unparalleled access to job seekers with over 350 million unique visitors globally, according to Indeed data, and an extended reach through Glassdoor. I love how adaptable Indeed is as well, whether you're hiring one person or you need lots for a scalable project, like hiring platform that lets you schedule and interview hundreds of candidates in one day. Like there's no other one that you would want to use. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/SmartPassive. Just go to Indeed.com/SmartPassive right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/SmartPassive. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire. You need Indeed. We entrepreneurs are at our desks a lot, so having solid equipment is super important. And a sit-stand desk can make a huge difference, as many folks on our team will attest to. If you haven't tried one yet, this offer from Uplift is for you. Plus, you can support the show at the same time. Visit upliftdesk.com/SPI for 5% off your order. Over 1 million customers have chosen Uplift Desk. Innovative product designs, reasonable pricing, same-day shipping, free accessories with every desk. You can see why they're such a big hit. And did I mention the industry-leading 15-year warranty? And that covers the complete desk, by the way, not just the top or some fine print like that. Moving while you work is just healthier. And Uplift Desk provides a state-of-the-art experience. They're stable, made of very solid materials. There's over 100 desktop choices and customizations available. Just the choices for material for your desk are amazing, all the way from laminate to eco to bamboo to solid wood. If you want to build the workstation of your dreams, I highly recommend checking them out. Go to upliftdesk.com/SPI for 5% off your order. That's UPLIFT desk.com/SPI to get 5% off your entire order.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Pat Flynn, and welcome to session 70 of the Smart Passive Income Podcast. I'm so happy you're joining me today, and I hope you dug that intro. That was all vocalized by me, the beats and everything. I just have so much fun doing that. I hope you don't mind me doing more of that, because I think that's what I'm going to do at the intros from this point forward, because I've ran out of sort of funny little sayings to say, and I love music, and I like to pretend I can sing a cappella. So, and Pitch Perfect is one of my favorite movies. I'll admit that. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. That's a Daft Punk song for you today. And during the announcer intro, you may have heard that, the very, very sad truth that I did get a Sega Saturn instead of a PlayStation. And as we all know, some of you probably don't even know what a Sega Saturn is, but they both came out at the same time and I got the wrong one. But anyway, that's okay, because I'm here with you today, and we have a very special guest on the show, someone who is bringing a little bit something different to the table, someone who is going to talk a little bit of psychology, a lot of psychology, and a lot of just really interesting things about our brains and why we do the things we do and how that can help us in our business. This is really important stuff, as much as it may not seem like it when you're listening to it. When you really think about it, this is actually at the root of everything we do. My guest today is Sean Webb from I Am Podcast, IAMpodcast.com. Talks and discovered a lot about how the human brain works. And he has a really interesting story about how he discovered all this, which he's going to share right at the top of the show. So without further ado, let's get to the interview with Sean Webb from IAMpodcast.com. Hey, what's up, Sean? Welcome to the Smart Passive Income Podcast. How are you?
I am well. Thank you, Pat. Thank you for having me.
Of course. For everybody out there who doesn't know who you are, kind of tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got into that.
Sure. Well, I guess I could start by saying I'm just like you, Pat. I'm just a guy who decided to figure something out and then figured it out, and now I'm trying to help people improve their lives through that knowledge. You're doing it with developing passive income streams, and I'm basically doing it through practical methods of improving emotional intelligence and increasing inner peace. I wish that there was a better backstory, but it's the typical backstory. About 12 years ago, I was an executive at a Fortune Global 100, and I had a 6-digit salary, working 30 hours a week, and I was flying to Europe quarterly. Was in charge of service delivery into 200 countries and territories. Had a nice house, a nice luxury sedan, a motorcycle, a boat, classic convertibles, a second car, and I was dating a very attractive woman who is now my wife of 10 years, thankfully.
Awesome.
And I had everything that I was told that I was supposed to have to be happy, except that I wasn't happy. So that's the basic, typical story of our entrepreneur path that a lot of us are taking. And so rather than looking outside of myself for what might be wrong and what I needed to fix in the equation, which is the trap that a lot of us fall into, we start thinking, I need a bigger house or a better car or a better employer or, taken to extremes, the ultimate can come into, I need a better spouse, or maybe we need to add kids to the equation, whatever. Instead, I started looking within myself to figure out what was going on in there. What's the problem? Mm-hmm. And so long story short, without knowing anything about psychology, over the next few years, I figured out the process within myself that created my own emotional suffering. And so then I started studying psychology so I could use the correct terms to explain it to people. And then that's when I discovered that the world of psychology really didn't have this whole process figured out yet. And there are, hundreds of psych studies that support the model that I put together. But, it was at that point that I was like, wait a minute, I can't be the first person to have figured out the catalysis of emotional pain and suffering. There's got to be something I'm missing. So being a guy who doesn't like to waste time, I presented the model to some of the world's leading specialists in effective emotions computing at MIT and Georgia Tech, thinking, these people with 30 and 50 years of emotions research under their belt will surely tell me what I missed, pound me into the pavement, and send me packing. Mm-hmm. And so I presented it in the fall of last year and asked, am I crazy? What am I missing? And the response was, not only are you not crazy, it fits with all the current research, and you need to publish this. So I wrote a white paper for some PhDs at MIT, and I turned that into a book that I just published on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. And now I have a virtual research team of PhDs moving us slowly towards putting some science behind the model.
That you said you didn't have an amazing story. That is an amazing story. Like, how does someone like you, Sean, who says, you're a guy just like me and, we're just regular people, how do you go from, not knowing anything about psychology and just, at least understanding that, you're not happy, to all of a sudden speaking in front of MIT and Georgia Tech, professors and people who have done research on this before and giving them something new? I mean, how does that happen?
I think it was really coming at it from, an ignorant point of view, really. I mean, it was, I think education, I went to college and just like everybody else went to school. I think our education sometimes puts us into a pattern of thinking that is just like everyone else's pattern of thinking. And so I kind of had the benefit of not thinking like a psychologist and approaching this from a systems perspective. I used to be a systems engineer for Silicon Graphics, Cray Research a long time ago, a supercomputing company. Google took over their headquarters. But I came at it from that pragmatic perspective of how do things work inside my head without having any prior knowledge or realization of how things are supposed to work or how people think about how things work inside our heads. And so I guess that's kind of how I approached it. I said, okay, how do my emotions work? What is the process within me that's creating this melancholy, creating this non-satisfaction about all these awesome things that are supposed to be making me happy? And so I just kind of put it together. And it was at that point that, I started talking to people about it, and they were like, well, yeah, that's kind of how my emotions work too. And I was like, all right. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started into, delving into psychology and figuring out, well, psychology, there's a ton of research that supports every bit of this model in a microscopic standpoint, but no one really put the big picture together and presented it in this is how they work generally.
Now, were you scared at all, like presenting to these people who are studying psychology, you not coming from that particular background? Did you worry that maybe this wasn't right, or, what was going through your head?
Hugely. I was fully expecting to be handed my hat and patted on the head and said, thank you for your, little presentation. Have a nice day. It was really intimidating. I mean, I'm presenting to a couple of people who have been on the stage at TED. Right. And who talk about emotions and who are the foremost experts in the world on emotions research regarding, computing research and building these models to explain research in a logical fashion. And here I am, this guy who, probably had a Psych 101 course in community college on my way to my degree. And, I'm saying, okay, well, tell me what's wrong with this so I can go home and put it to rest.
Right. That's so cool. I mean, even before we get into what that model is and sort of what that's done for you, I just think that just speaks highly of really, just how much you believed in something and how much you really wanted to figure this out and what that actually did for you. I mean, you could have easily just said, oh, I'm going to look for more external things to make me happy. Or you could have just said, oh, well, I'm not happy. I'll just try to be happy. But you actually tried to figure this out. And then you took it a step further and you wanted to share this with everybody. So kudos to you for that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, because it's really had a great benefit to my personal life. And, so now it's like, I want to share this with everybody. So I'm trying to, listening to your podcast and stuff, I'm trying to develop some passive income products that, will help people become Jedi masters of their mind for however they want to use it, attaining inner peace, becoming better business people, improving their relationships or their parenting skills, or, we're even developing a product to help police officers handle highly charged situations while they're in the middle of that situation so that the municipalities can reduce their litigation risks when somebody doesn't step on somebody's neck too hard, that type of thing. And so, an added benefit would be so our police officers can remain controlled in almost any situation, which I think is a good requirement for society.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's really interesting because you're taking this thing that to normal people and to people like myself, it just seems like there wouldn't be any sort of formula, I guess, or sort of equation or model that goes along with emotions and how it all works. But based on what you're saying here, there's a particular way things happen. If we can understand that, we're going to be way better off.
Oh, totally. Because the studies on emotional intelligence, there are tons of studies on emotional intelligence. One even just recently that shows, the adolescent social skills are increased. This is a study done by Desiree Ruiz Aranda in Spain. She showed that a higher level of emotional intelligence creates a higher level of social skill in adolescents and a lower level of stress in teenagers, and helping solve the problem of teenage angst. Mm-hmm. And another study published in Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience showed that IQ and EQ, emotional quotient, is tightly coupled together. Where it used to be, they thought it was totally separated, that you could be really smart and emotionally ignorant, or emotionally ignorant and intelligent and incredibly intelligent. But now they're seeing they're exceptionally coupled, and so increasing your emotional quotient will increase your intelligence quotient.
Okay, this is all. For some people out there listening, I'm sure this is like, okay. Let's just talk about what this is exactly. But even before we get to that, I want to have you answer this question. How is this all going to benefit the audience here? Those of us listening, the online entrepreneurs, the bloggers, the business owners. What can you do specifically to help us?
Sure. Well, I'm also an entrepreneur, and have been for the last 7 or 8 years. I'm a alumnus of the Advanced Technologies Development Center out of Georgia Tech. And so I've done a couple of startups. And so I've gone through the whole process of raising money and, doing businesses and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then I found you, and I decided this is going to be the model for me. But regarding the question, the benefits to entrepreneurs, we as entrepreneurs are creative people. And so we experience ups and downs that sometimes can be severe. And, it's just part of the landscape of being creative. And so we have these crests and troughs regarding our positivity and our creativity and our productivity, which then ultimately will affect our profitability in the end. Our negative emotions like, fear and anger and sadness, worry, regret, et cetera, are the ones that paralyze us to a certain extent as entrepreneurs. When we get discouraged or distracted or taken off path or lose motivation or lose focus, what is happening there is that we're being affected by an emotion within us that's causing the symptom of us not being able to be as productive as we can be. So, in other words, if we lose our wind in our sails, it's because of some sort of emotional disappointment or emotionally created chemical imbalance or emotional occurrence that our mind is either consciously or unconsciously chewing on. And we need to get that thing out of the way, because when our mind is clear and when we can see our goals and when we're not being distracted by other stuff, that's when we can get a heck of a lot done.
Okay, so you're saying that, on the surface level, we may notice that as business owners, entrepreneurs, bloggers, we might not be as productive as we want to be, or there might be some sort of fear that we have, or anger towards something, or, we're distracted, and there's something deeper which is causing that. And a lot of us, even me, I see, well, I'm not getting this done because I'm getting distracted, or I'm not getting this done because I'm scared, or I'm not getting this done because I'm just procrastinating. But I don't think about, okay, well, why am I procrastinating? Or why am I not getting this done? So tell us more about that.
Okay, and those types of things can, like the fear of failure, right, will inhibit us from even getting started on projects, right? Right. They'll stop us from even pushing forward on things that we need to get done. Right. So, it's very important to understand our emotions and understand the process of our emotions so that we can get those things out of the way, understand them, because, Psych 101 teaches us that understanding our emotions and being able to name them and being able to look at them then creates a big, thick black wall that we're removed from emotions, and we become less controlled by our emotions and more controlling of our emotions. And so it helps us be more effective, right? Mm-hmm.
Now, for beginners, say someone who hasn't even started yet, they're going through this fear. What are some of the sort of causes of that fear? What are the emotions that people just starting out typically go through?
All right, well, let's talk about the science of emotions, and then we can spin back around to how it plays into business. How about that?
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so, we should first understand the basic definitions of emotions, or what they are. They're basically a product of our subconscious brain activity. And so then you need to ask, okay, well, what is the brain? Well, the brain is the organ that from a 50,000-foot view helps prolong our survival. I mean, when we come out of mommy's belly, we have a ton of intelligence, but we're also a clean slate to a certain extent. We already know how to run digestion, respiration, circulatory, immune system, etc., but then we know nothing about our environment or ourselves or how to survive in that environment. So immediately the brain becomes a sponge, soaking up everything it can regarding the world into which we've entered. It starts defining the world and it starts defining us, because it's important to understand the world, because we need to know how to find food and shelter, and that things like bears are dangerous. And, that information can extend our lifespan. And then we also need to know our definition of ourselves, because knowing how fast we can run and how far we can jump is also information that can extend our lives. And this definition of self that the brain collects is called our sense of self in psychology, but some spiritual masters and ancient psychological teachings call it ego. Now, the sense of self is important when it comes to emotions. So let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
Sense of self can be simplified into a number of attachments within the mind. Our sense of self, when we're born, starts out with the experiencing of our senses, but then cognitively gets altered when mommy points at herself and says, mommy, and then points at you and says your name. So immediately your sense of self then evolves into, okay, I must be everything within the confines of my skin, and I am my name. And these become mindful attachments that then become part of your brain's definition of you. Now, from there, we add other attachments. We become attached to the people around us, our toys. We become attached to our routine. Anything that we see as part of our world becomes a part of our sense of self. And so later in life, this shows up as, we're attaching to things like political affiliations, religions, our job, our nationality, our ethnicity, our likes and dislikes, such as our favorite sports teams, and even ideas like, I would like this day to go well for me, or I would like the protagonist of this movie to win the girl in the end. Mm-hmm. Now, this is important because emotions are the subconscious reactions to our perceptions that are associated with our sense of self. Emotions come from the brain, and as such are designed to prolong our life. They're there to help throw things in front of our waking consciousness that we need to pay attention to. So when a bear walks out of the woods in front of us, we're presented with a situation that is a threat to our sense of self. Fear is the emotion that is the result to a threat to self. The reaction triggers a flood of adrenaline into our bloodstream. It constricts the pupils, focuses our attention, preps us for fight or flight in that bear situation. And that is a good and healthy emotional reaction that can indeed prolong our lives, right? Mm-hmm. Where emotions go off the track, however, and where they start to cause us problems is when they extend into reacting to things that pertain to our extended sense of self, to include the things that we attach to that aren't really who we are and that aren't really life-threatening. For instance, if you're a big fan of a certain football team, right, a psychologically identical fear will present itself inside you when your team is about to lose the big game, right? Yep. And so it's the same process. The cognitive attachment to our favorite sports team has been added to our sense of self, and now that portion of our sense of self is being threatened by the other team. So some level of fear is the result. Well, similarly, we can experience emotions about other mindful attachments to our businesses, to our politics, to attacks on our country, down to, attacks to or the fear of failure that stops us from even getting started, right? Now, specifically, it works like this. Every attachment that we have gets an expectation or preference assigned to it in our mind. Now, this is basically a little equation that I put together called the equation of emotion. It is expectation and or preference about your attachment of self as compared to your reality as perceived or your perception of whatever the world's giving you at the moment. That will either create a positive, a negative reaction, positive or negative emotional reaction.
Okay.
Now,
can you re-say that equation? Because I think that's really important. So just correct me if I'm wrong. It's what you expect versus what happens.
Right.
And that either causes, something positive or something negative. So obviously our expectations have sort of a big role in what goes on. And then also our perception of actually what happens. And sometimes our perception of what happens isn't always the truth. So
That's correct.
I just want to make sure that was clear. So just keep it going. This is really interesting, stuff and stuff that we don't normally talk about when it comes to, creating passive income or building businesses. But I think, this is at the root of everything. So I think it's really important. So again, thank you for coming on and sharing all this. So we have the equation, expectation or preference versus, reality causing some sort of either a positive or negative emotion. Where do we go from there? How do we control any of that?
Okay, well, when your expectation or preference is similar to your reality as perceived, a positive emotion comes as a result.
Makes sense.
When your expectation or preference is different than your perception, your reality as perceived, then a negative emotion is going to come as a result. Now, there are specific, this isn't the end all be all, there are specific variables that will tell you whether it's anger, fear, worry, regret, sadness, etc. But basically, this is how emotions work. When your expectations or preferences are met in life, such as even when you're a baby and you're hungry, everything's fat and happy and you're giggling. If you're hungry and you're not being fed, then you start crying, right? And it's that simple all the way through life. Your expectations and or preferences about your sense of self are either met or they're not met, and you have a positive or negative emotion that is the result. And when you don't have one or the other, let's say you have a favorite sports team and you don't know the score of the game, you don't have an RP, there's no emotional reaction, right? It could be driving you crazy that you don't know the score, but at the same time, that's a different equation.
RP being reference point.
RP being reality as perceived.
Oh, well, or reference point. Just kidding.
Right. So,
cool.
And then if you don't have an expectation or preference, also, let's say you're watching the Super Bowl and you don't care about either team, you don't have an emotional reaction to the result of the game. So it's a good little equation that helps us understand the basics, because at any point that you're having an emotion, you can always ask yourself, okay, what is my expectation or preference regarding this situation, and or what is my perception, what is my reality as perceived in this moment that is causing this emotional reaction? So it's a basic, good indicator of what's going on inside you. Okay?
Right.
Okay, cool. So
can we tie that back into business?
Yes. So let's say you have an expectation or preference regarding a sale of a new product that you're putting out or something like that.
Cool.
And you get the initial sales results and they are not what you expected them to be. You're going to have a negative emotional reaction to that expectation or preference not being met. So you have an expectation of the sales numbers and they're not coming in. And so reality is now replacing your expectation and or preference, saying it's not what you wanted it to be. And in the situation of an actual devaluation of one of your attachments, that's when sadness occurs. And sadness has multiple levels. Sadness can be expressed at a very low level of being disappointed or being hurt. And then at the mid-level, you have a real sadness. At the higher level, you have grief and despair. And so how attached you are to your expectation and a preference basically helps dictate how much emotion you feel. Let's say you have an attachment to your product doing well and it doesn't do well. Well, that'll dictate that you feel a little bit disappointed or you have a low level of sadness. However, if grandma dies, you're highly attached to grandma. And so a loss there will, elicit a higher level of sadness, despair, and grief.
Right. Now that makes sense. And I think that's sort of obvious as far as, the more we're attached to something and the more it doesn't work out, the more, grief and despair we're going to have versus just maybe being a little bit disappointed.
Right.
Now,
exactly.
how can we control our emotions when we are met with sadness? Because, a lot of times, especially when you're starting out, what you want to happen or what your expectations may be are hardly ever reality.
Right.
So we're going to put ourselves in that negative situation all the time, which, for a lot of people means giving up or just not believing in themselves anymore and going down this spiral.
Right, exactly. And so the two ways, or there are a few ways actually we can control our emotions. I mean, the emotions themselves are a reaction of the subconscious portion of our mind and our brain, right? So we can't actually control the process that the brain uses to create the emotions. But because we know the variables in the equation of emotion, our expectation and our preference and our perception, we can start to mold the variables a little bit to help us shape our emotional reactions a little better. And there are a couple of other things that we can do as well to help control our emotional well-being and our emotional reactions. And one, of course, is knowledge of the process. Again, going back to Psychology 101, when we understand the process and we can identify the process, we can witness the process, we are removed from the process and removed from being affected by the emotion as much. But the second is plasticity, which opens a whole new, huge book on how to create a higher level of emotional well-being inside of ourselves. Because the cool thing about plasticity, emotions come out of our brain, and our brain is not what you see is what you get, and it's fully baked and will never change entity. Your brain, thanks to plasticity, reacts and can grow and shrink in various areas based on, what your conscious will is and what your activities are from your mind into your brain. So like if you, for instance, use your right hand all the time on your actions and things like that, the area associated with your movement of your right hand is going to grow in your brain. And if you never use your left hand, that section is going to atrophy in your brain. And this is, proven through hundreds of studies at this point, including, some studies that they had to do on animals and, cutting their control of their arms and limbs and stuff like that. Some very controversial stuff, but it's being shown now that is regarding emotional intelligence and emotional well-being, things like meditation can help us out. Meditation can increase our emotional well-being. It can control the alpha wave activity in the brain that creates the severity of emotional output. Mm-hmm. Massachusetts General showed meditation changes the brain structure in as little as 8 weeks. Wow. And at the point that you're changing your brain structure, you're changing your emotional output circuitry. So if you can get control of your brain and bring the noise level down inside, it is more easy for you to be able to slip into that space of the observer and slip into that space of being more in control rather than being controlled or being a victim of what's going on in your brain.
Right, but it's so hard to control what's going on in your head sometimes. Oh,
hugely, because, it's designed to throw things up in front of your consciousness that, are constantly, like 1,000 years ago, it's great. Is this important? Is this important? Should we pay attention to this? Should we pay attention to this? And a lot of those things are going to be things that help prolong your life. But now it's like, okay, who's going to get kicked off idle tonight? And a lot of first world issues that distract us. Oh, who sent me that last email? And so there's a lot of stuff that our mind throws up in front of us that is just horrible for us, because there's a recent study that showed the average distraction comes in every 11 minutes. And if we allow ourselves, if we're unfocused enough to allow ourselves to switch gears and associate our attention with whatever that came in as that distraction, it takes us 25 minutes to get back to our original task. And by the way, we're increasing our stress levels along the way, because a Gloria Marks study in 2012 showed that interruptions like that result in significantly higher stress levels in the body. And then another study by David Meyer at U of M showed that the higher stress levels equate to higher stress hormones, which dramatically inhibit your short-term memory retention. And so, if you're not controlling that stuff, you're not only not doing yourself good, you're actually doing yourself harm. Because according to the National Institutes of Health, stress is the number one killer nationally, because it causes high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, et cetera. So
now, are these interruptions that are sort of because of external factors, like, say I'm working and then somebody knocks on the door and then all of a sudden I'm interrupted, or I might get an email ping on my desktop while I'm in the middle of something? Like, is it that, or is it just me working on something and then just deciding to go on Facebook or,
Well, it's both.
Okay.
When the distractions come in from external factors, that is most common. But a lot of times, if your mind is a little crazy, and always throwing up other ideas in front of you, should I pay attention to this? Should I pay attention to this? Well, if you do pay attention to it, that's going to increase your stress level, and that's where meditation and mind practice comes back into focus again for us, because you have things like the Institute for National Medicine and Prevention. They did a 10-year study, and they split people into two groups. And the first group, they told, okay, we want you to eat right and exercise. And the second group was told to meditate for 20 minutes twice a day. And 10 years later, this is a 10-year study, the people who meditated reduced their risk for heart attack and stroke by 66% over the people who were just dieting and exercising.
66%.
And for the folks who could only meditate once a day, they reduced heart attack and stroke by almost 50% over the diet and exercise folks. But the bonus was the meditators reported dramatic reductions in anger issues. They also reported reduced fatigue, increasing their alertness, increasing their concentration. They had enhanced cognitive functions on tests. And there was about a 50% decrease in all the noise that could distract them from the tasks that they had. All that noise that we have as entrepreneurs, all those awesome ideas that are flying around in our heads at all times, not that your creativity is reduced, because the creativity is actually enhanced, but those distracting thoughts were decreased by about 50%.
Wow. So really the big thing here is just to do what we can to sort of control our minds and sort of just guide the traffic that's going on in our heads instead of just letting it all just jumble.
Yeah, totally. Because it takes practice, right? You don't sit down to the piano and expect to play, a concerto the first time out. It's something that you have to develop a skill for and develop a practice of. And especially when you're talking about dealing with the mind, is our experience of the brain. And so the brain is designed to throw things up in front of us all the time. Is this important? Is this important? Is this important? Because that type of activity is beneficial for our prolonged survival. And so in our more first world experience, where we've kind of got, wild animals taken care of and, they're behind cages and we're not necessarily in life peril every 10 minutes. That kind of stuff is now becoming an inhibiting factor for our health, because it's extending from what we think of our sense of self. Now we have extensions of our sense of self, such as our politics, our religion, our sports teams, or whatever, our expectations for the day. And now when our reality as perceived isn't meeting those expectations, that's causing negative emotions. That's causing stress hormones. That's causing short-term memory reduction. That's causing higher cortisol levels, higher stress hormone levels, shortening our lives. That's some serious stuff, not to mention being extremely distracting to us when we're trying to get stuff done for our business.
Right. Right. No, that makes complete sense. Let's try to talk about some specific examples that people in the audience might go through or have gone through or may go through in the future when it comes to building an online business. Let's talk about some of the most common fears or common instances of negativity that people might come across. And maybe we could talk about how people might be able to either react to that or avoid that.
Sure.
And we had talked previously about this a few months back. My servers went down.
Yeah.
And it screwed up a lot of stuff. And, a lot of people perceived sort of my reaction to it and said, wow, you're pretty calm. But, in my head, I was just kind of livid. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my computer on the floor just because I knew that every minute that my site was not up, that was minutes where people were trying to visit my site and people weren't going there. Income lost, opportunities to build relationships with people just lost, and just an overall negative sort of experience for my brand as a whole.
Right.
Now, people, that was something unexpected.
Right.
I didn't think that would happen. How could I have better either controlled the situation, reacted to it, maybe acted faster, or maybe better prepped for it?
Okay. Well, regarding prepping for it, I mean, you know that goes into a whole disaster recovery scenario, and basically there's a whole separate analysis of some things that I used to do for my Fortune Global 100, where you analyze all the potential threats and all the potential eventualities of your operational procedures and what could go down, and what are single points of failure, and how do you get those things back up, and how much money do you need to spend to get those things back up immediately, that type of thing.
Right. So sort of technical things I probably should have prepped for just in case.
There's a bunch of technical stuff that you can do. But basically, the emotional reaction that you were feeling because of your site going down can go right back to our simple equation of emotion. It was your expectation and or preference as compared to, reality as perceived, what the world was giving you equaled your emotional reaction. Now, I'm guessing you had an attachment to not wanting your site go down, so there was a little bit of surprise initially. Yep. But then there was probably a little bit of anger as well. Now, anger, by definition, and you can get this. I wrote a book called How Emotions Work in Humans and Computers. And if you were listening to NPR last week, they're doing a big thing, or they had a big story on how targeted advertising for emotions in users is going to be the next huge thing. If you want to understand that, go read that book. It's on Amazon.com, Audible.com, iTunes. It explains how emotions work and how to use that information for targeted advertising. But anger specifically is the attack of something outside of your sense of self, something off your attachment map that attacks something on your attachment map. So you've got your website, and someone off of your website attacked your website and reduced its value for that short period of time. So I'm guessing that you felt a little bit of anger in that situation. Is that correct?
Quite a bit, yeah.
And so that's how you explain it logically. It's something or someone outside, and this could be a person or it could be an accident. It could be a server going down or an internet pipeline going down. Something happened that attacked something that was inside your circle. Just like someone striking your child who you didn't know or do know, that would set you off. Someone or something attacked your website, and that also set you off. And there's probably a great deal of disappointment as well, because now your website is down and there's a real value decrease of something on your attachment map, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And so now how quickly you process those things and how quickly you get by them will determine how well you react to the situation, because a lot of people will get caught up in the whole stewing about the situation or being caught in the emotional reaction and not being able to take action before they can process their way out of the emotion. And so the faster you can process your way through that emotion, the better off you're going to be. So the reality is, when you're talking about being able to look at your expectation and or preference, I mean, it is good to even just verbalize, to say, okay, all right, my website is down. I would prefer my website to be up. It sucks that it's down. What at this point do I need to do to help get my website up? What actions do I need to take? And that will help get you by and separate yourself from the emotional reaction that you're having, right? And even if like the first example that we used, if you have an expectation or preference about your sales numbers of a certain product that you just put out, and the sales numbers are coming in and it's not selling very well, you could sit there and stew in your disappointment and say, man, that sucks. Or you could say, all right, my expectation or preference was the sales numbers are high. The reality is perceived, the RP of the equation is that they're not. All right, what action can I take to increase them? Now, instead of being caught up in the emotion and being controlled by the emotion, you are now taking the next step away from, okay, let's get through that emotion. Let's forget about that emotion and let's take the action necessary to get me to where I want to be in my goals.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Now, let me ask you this question, taking that equation, expectation and perception.
Yep.
What if, for instance, my website going down, what if, as a way to more closely match reality versus expectation, if I just expected my website to go down?
You can. I mean, the reality is that in the tech world, things break. I mean, I can't tell you how many hard drives that I had go bad on me, and how much data that I lost before I finally broke down and bought a multi-$1,000 RAID system. Things break in the tech world. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And so you need to have an expectation that things are going to break even at unexpected times. And so if you set your expectation that some things are going to break, you definitely are going to handle those situations where your outage comes up much better. You're going to say, okay, boom, this is a time when something has failed. And I expected that something is going to fail. Okay, it just happens to be happening now. Either it's a good time or it's a bad time. It doesn't matter, because now you have at least a miniature plan in your head to say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Here are the things that I thought about, that I needed, that I planned for. I have a copy of the website. Let's just upload that. Let's get it to an alternate server if the host is down for some reason or whatever. And switch it over on the A record or whatever you're doing to get your site back up. Having that expectation, like you said, is going to dramatically increase your ability to be able to handle your emotional reaction from whatever event is causing your strife.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I brought that up. Now, what about expectation versus goal? How do you kind of define that? Because what if, I'm worried of people and even myself saying, okay, well, I'm going to expect my website to go down, and that's it. And so I don't even care, or I don't strive for 100% uptime. Like, where does the goal come in this equation?
Yeah. Oh, and this is one of the best Buddhist enigmas, if you want, because the Buddhists basically have been touting for the last 5,000 years. If you don't have any attachments to things, you won't have any negative emotion or negative strife in your life, because it actually turns out to be scientifically true. If you don't have any expectations or preferences because you don't have any attachments, half of the equation of emotion is empty, and you won't have any negative emotions as a result of the stuff that happens in your life.
Right,
but sense. The funny part is, we live in this world where it's required that we have money to pay for the food for our kids and keep house over our head and yada yada yada. So we have to have goals and set milestones to achieve, and so those things become attachments. The key to being able to manage that is to understand the process, to understand mindfully that, okay, this is an attachment that I'm putting on. And, sometimes things are going to go well, sometimes they're not going to go well, and I need to be able to just expect that there's going to be an up and down. And having that expectation of that there's going to be a little bit of an up and down from a daily perspective is going to help you manage those up and downs. But then also, it's going to keep those attachments that you put on, those goals that you put on, at arm's length. It's going to help you realize, okay, these are things that I want to do, but they're not necessarily really a part of who I am. They're not a portion of my sense of self. I am going to work towards these things. I'm going to do the things that are necessary to get these things done. But at the same time, if one of them fails, it's not going to ruin my life or ruin my day. It's going to be one of those things where you can, and this is where perception comes in. Changing, one of the coolest things that I learned a long time ago, before I even started this equation of emotion thing, was I learned to look at my failures as positive events. In sales a long time ago, I was in sales for about 10 years in these various companies and climbed the internal corporate ladder through sales. And I was President's Club every year in sales because I was the best guy on the team who could get to the no the fastest, the NO. Mm-hmm. And so at the point where I could identify a person who wasn't going to buy, man, that was awesome. Because that got me that much closer statistically to the person who was going to buy. And it got me past all the wasted time of dealing with that customer who wasn't going to buy, so that I could get to the customer who was going to buy and help me make or exceed quota. So I got to love every failure that I had because it got me that much closer to my success. And so altering our perception about our failures can do a lot of stuff for us. It can remove the fear of getting started, because if we don't have the fear of failure, then we don't have the fear of getting something started, because what's the big deal? If we fail, big deal, we're going to learn something from it. And then also we can take a number of positives from the things that we do fail on. And so changing our perception can also then increase our emotional well-being.
Now, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, as far as changing your perception, couldn't you just say, well, you're sort of just fooling yourself?
Well, yes and no, because, the reality is how you look at things is how you see the world. And, from a very, Zen type of perspective, we create every bit of our world. The light waves coming into our eyes are coded into patterns and objects and things like that. And so we're creating those things in our head. And, a lot of times, like when people have illnesses or they have disabilities or something like that, they'll have hallucinations, or they'll have, things don't work right. They're creating an alternate world that, is certainly real for them. And so, how we look at things and how we process things and how we decide to look at things makes a huge difference in how we're going to react to things and how we deal with the world. Such as, like you're driving along the highway and, you expect that, people wouldn't cut you off, and somebody does. You're going to have a huge problem with that if you take that person cutting you off as a slight to your perception of self. Because, cutting you off, because one of my research PhDs is a specialist in anger management behind the wheel. And so he is dealing with right now how people get cut off in traffic and they perceive it as a slight to themselves, which causes road rage. Because that person is basically telling you, I'm more important than you are. You aren't important enough for me not to, just cut you off in traffic, that type of thing. And so that's an external, entity or a person that's not attached to you attacking something on your attachment map, your sense of self. They're outside your attachment map saying, I'm more important than you are and you suck. So that's why you get mad when somebody cuts you off in traffic. If you have that expectation or preference or that they are going to cut you off, or the perception that, okay, this guy's either just not paying attention or he's an idiot and it's really not a slight to me, that perception difference makes the difference between you getting upset behind the wheel and not getting upset behind the wheel.
Yeah, and getting into an accident perhaps and not.
Yeah, totally.
Dude, I'm so glad you mentioned that last part about, you're not fooling yourself, you're actually making yourself.
Right, exactly.
What you feel and what you think is reality.
Exactly. Because here's the thing. If you, let's say, like I used to get caught up a lot of times in these online flame wars. And, there would be times where people would make comments or whatever. And I would sit there defending myself or whatever it was that I was attached to one guy who was on the internet who had intended to just be a troll, who had intended to. And so my perception was that this guy's opinion was important and this guy needed to be won over and this guy needed to be defended against. And so, because I had that perception, how many hours did I waste, trying to defend my attachment to this, whoever it was, right? Yeah. If my perception was that, okay, this guy is a troll and there's absolutely no basis for his argument whatsoever, then that changes my whole life. That gives me hours back in a day.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, there's two great things we just talked about here, and it's a perfect way to end the show. One, and I can bring it back to a quote that I've said several times on the blog, and people are going to, remember this when I say it. It's a quote by Henry Ford. It's whether you think you can or you can't, you're right.
Exactly.
It's one of my all-time favorite quotes because it's so true, and I've experienced that. So really, you just have to change your perception sometimes and be confident, even if you don't know exactly what it is you're doing. Learn from your failures. That's another thing I mention all the time. And the second thing is, haters gonna hate.
Yep.
Haters are gonna hate, and so I think that's a perfect way to end this. Sean, if people want to get to know you a bit more, do you have a website, maybe a Twitter handle that they can, come find you at?
Yeah, totally. In fact, if you want to understand a lot better about all the emotional stuff that we talked about today, I have this thing called the Body, Mind, Spirit 101. It's a free course. It's 10 weeks. It's like 20 some odd videos that you get sent in email. It's available at IAMPodcasts.com. .com. You can go sign up and just get the emails, and it'll explain all of the basic emotions, how they work within you, and then give you good exercises, including basics of meditation and stuff like that you can learn about the various ways to help get control of your mind. Because the quote that I like is one from Horace that says, "Control your mind, or it will control you."
Nice.
And then if you want to dive in a little deeper about the technological side of how to understand emotions in code form and make them alive in the computer world, you can pick up the book "How Emotions Work in Humans and Computers." It's available everywhere except where printed books are made, because I just don't like the fact of killing trees. I'm just against that. And then eventually, if you stop by I Am Podcasts, I'll put you on the mailing list to let you know about the emotional intelligence app that's going to come out, that's going to be focused on increasing levels of inner peace, because Gandhi's quote is the other one that I love, is world peace can only be attained through inner peace. And so we're going to do an app that helps raise emotional intelligence, thus raising all the benefits of all the studies that have been put out, but also then increase the quantity of world peace.
Love it. I love it, Sean. All those links and resources will be on the show notes for this episode. Dude, thank you again for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. Congrats on all the success and the wild ride that you've had, and I'm sure it's just getting started. Thanks again.
No problem. Thank you, Pat. And let me know if there's anything I can ever do.
Of course. Thanks. All right, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Sean Webb from, again, IamPodcast.com. A lot of interesting, crazy things. I know a lot of that is probably over some of your heads. It was for me, at least, until we started to get into the really good examples, like at the end there. And you might have to listen to this one again, because it has some really good, important, incredibly important stuff for you and your business, and just sort of whenever things may end up happening in your life. Now, before we finish up, I do have a SpeakPipe voicemail for you. Again, if you want to leave me a voicemail, you can. You can go to speakpipe.com/PatFlynn. You can leave me a voicemail, and you might get featured on the SPI podcast, just like Mr. Frank Block here. Frank has a website. You can find it at metropriesta.com. I won't spell it here because he spells it in the audio. And it's a really interesting thing he has going on, and he asks a couple really great questions. So let's get to the voicemail from Frank.
Hi, Pat. It's Frank Block here, calling from metropriesta.com. That's metropriesta.com. About 2 years ago, I came across your ebook, eBooks the Smart Way, and I loved it. But I struggled to find a topic. And then I met a retired NHL All-Star named Metro Presta, hence the website title. And he wanted me to write a biography on him. And I instantly thought of doing it as an ebook and an audiobook, just like you outlined in your ebook. Now, after doing tons of interviews with him and many of his old teammates and friends, I'm very close to having it completed. And I have a daughter who is a graphic and media design consultant, and she's setting up my website and that. And she suggested that I don't do it as you outlined in your ebook, but rather to offer it through iTunes and available for Kindle. What are your thoughts? I'd like to know the pros and cons of doing it either way, or maybe both. I just want your input. I'd also be interested in knowing how to edit my audio so that each audio file will have multiple chapters. Any help would be appreciated. Keep up the good work, Pat, and thanks again for all that you do.
Hey, thanks, Frank, for the questions. I'm sure a lot of people out there listening right now will also have the same questions or come across the point at which they would need answers to this question. So I'm really happy to answer it for you today. Now, obviously, when you write a book, you'll get to that point where you finish up, and then you can decide whether or not to either publish it on your own site, like how I did at greenexamacademy.com when I packaged a lot of that content, put it into my own book, and sold it directly from my website at greenexamacademy.com, or you could do sort of like what I did with Let Go, which is publish a book on the Amazon platform for Kindle, for Nook, for iBooks, and there's also now Snippet app is available. It really depends on what the major goal is of this book. If your goal is to make a ton of money, then publishing on your own site can be the best option if you have that audience there, or if you know and have perhaps run tests on paid advertising to get traffic coming to your website. And the benefit of that is you have more control over how you run your promotions, what the price is. You can split test stuff. You can add bonuses and downloads and all this stuff. And yeah, you could do that with Amazon Books too, but this is all controlled on your own site. You can keep the branding experience the same on your own site. Again, that was very lucrative for me on greenexamacademy.com when I published the Green Exam walkthrough. And on Amazon.com, however, and all those other marketplaces, you have to think about what's there already and what the benefits are there. For example, Amazon.com has 300 million people who have their credit cards registered on their site and the ability to, with the click of a single button, to purchase whatever books are on there. And so you also have to think about that Amazon is a search engine, and it's probably the largest paid search engine in the world, meaning people go to Amazon expecting to find stuff that they're interested in and then pay for it, as opposed to something like Google or even iTunes or YouTube, where most people are searching for stuff that is free, for free information. What's cool about Amazon also is that you can benefit from the algorithms that are involved when you put a product on that particular marketplace. For example, you'll notice on the bottom half of any sales pages, people who bought this also bought this. And so you have the opportunity to put your book in front of other people's books and get eyes onto your book that way as well. Another benefit of Amazon specifically, is that you have the option to put your book in what's called KDP, or Kindle Direct Publishing Program Select, into their KDP Select program. What that does is it does two things for you. One, it gives people the ability to borrow your book, to sort of rent it out, and that actually helps you earn an income, based on a pool of money that Amazon has set aside for people who borrow books. And depending on the number of people who borrow, you might get a specific sort of percentage of that from all the books that are borrowed on Amazon. So that's one benefit. But the big benefit is that you have the ability to, for 5 days out of every 90 days that you have and are enrolled in KDP Select, you have the ability to run free promotions. And at any time, for any length of time between 1 and 5 days, and you can do this 5 days, 5 random days during the year, or you can do this 5 consecutive days during the year, you can run a free promotion. And every time I've noticed somebody run these free promotions, they have massive amounts of downloads. There are just parts of Amazon that showcase any books that have turned from paid to free. There are places on the web that sort of detect any of that activity. And so you'll get a lot of eyes on your book. You'll be giving away for free, but you'll be getting a lot of downloads. And that does a couple things for you. One, when you switch back to paid, you're going to be higher up in the rankings. You're going to have a lot more reviews, and you're going to have a lot more people potentially sharing that book in the future as well. So if the goal here is to get this book in front of as many eyes as possible, to reach out to people who you potentially would have never reached before because of the benefit of being on this marketplace versus being on your own website, and earning more money is not quite as important as getting more eyes on this book, then putting yourself onto these marketplaces is definitely the best way to go. Now, I will tell you that if you go and enroll in KDP Select, you don't have to. It's optional, but it will give you those 5 free days and income for people borrowing it. If you do go with KDP Select, you have to exclusively publish on Amazon for 90 days. You can't publish on your own website. You can't publish on Nook. You can't publish on iBooks or Snippet App or anywhere else. So that's one thing to think about. Now, publishing on these marketplaces, whether it's KDP Select or non-KDP Select, there's still a lot of good potential money in there as well. They do sort of control the marketplace. They give you most of the royalties in prices between $1.99 and I believe it's $9.99 or $7.99. I can't. There's a couple price points where it breaks off from 70% commission to 70% royalties to 35% royalties. They really try to control it within a couple price points, which are relatively low to what you could potentially earn on your website. But if you get more eyes on your book, you could potentially get those leads and then sell stuff potentially down the road, or introduce them to new books or other things that you may potentially sell, products on that website that you have. So there are ways to convert those leads that you get from getting more eyes on your brand through those marketplaces and get them to, down the road or at the end of the funnel, pay for something. So that's just something to think about. So I know that's a really long answer, but that's a very, very important question, and those are sort of my thoughts behind it. Now, as far as the audio file, this addresses your second question. How do you put chapters into an audio file? For those of you who might be wondering, yes, you can have separate MP3 files. That's what I did for my audiobook at greenexamacademy.com, which I sold alongside my ebook there. I had just separate MP3 files. I think I had like 60 separate ones. Now, you can create a single file that is sort of like an MP3 file, but it's called a M4B, B as in boy, which is the standard bookmarkable audiobook format, M4B. And what that does is it allows you to put different chapters into one audio file, whereas you can create ID3 tags between each of those chapters so that when you do reach that particular part in the audio, it will switch, the information on the screen that the people are listening to. It will say chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and things like that. And that's the sort of universal the audiobook format. So that's M4B. As far as how to create that, I'm not sure. I have never done that. I had people do that for me. I know there are services that can do that for you as well, and probably tools that you can use that you can download. Some free, perhaps. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm sure there are paid ones out there to create that single M4B standard bookmarkable audiobook format. So hopefully that helps Frank and everyone out there who had the same question. Now, to finish up today's show, I just would love to say thank you. Just thank you from the bottom of my dear little heart, because you guys are awesome. Like, seriously, I just enjoy so much what I do. Right now I'm staring at a wall while I'm speaking, but I know that there are tens of thousands of you listening to this right now, or who will eventually listen to this in the future. And just knowing that you're there just means the world to me. So if you could come by the blog, come by the show notes today, and just let me know how the podcast is going, what you're enjoying from it, maybe something I can improve on. I'm always looking to improve. Any sort of respectable, constructive criticism, I am always happy to accept. So come to the show notes. Whenever you get a chance, go to smartpassiveincome.com/session70, smartpassiveincome.com/session70. It's the only thing I want you to do. Go there. All the links mentioned in this show, although there weren't very many in this particular one, are there. But I also want you to leave a comment and just let me know how you feel about the podcast. We're at episode 70. We're approaching episode 100. I love doing this for you. Do you love listening? Let me know. smartpassiveincome.com/session70. Thank you guys. Love you so much. Hope you enjoyed the show. That's all I got. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Passive Income Podcast at www.smartpassiveincome.com.
Hey there, and thanks for sticking around to the end. If you're looking for more great shows like this one, definitely give How Success Happens a listen. Another great show from the Entrepreneur Podcast Network. On How Success Happens, Robert Tuchman features some of today's brightest entrepreneurial minds talking about overcoming challenges and viewing them as learning experiences to create success. The challenges that entrepreneurs face are ultimately what make many of us successful, however we define success, and that's what the show is all about. There's lots of names you'll surely recognize on the show every single week. Just recently, Robert had Nasty Gal CEO Sophia Amoruso on the show, and the former CEO of Snapple the week before that, which is really awesome. So listen to How Success Happens right now on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or Stitcher.